My name is Heather Joslyn. I'm Assistant Managing Editor at the Chronicle of Philanthropy. I'll be your moderator today. We have a great session ahead of us where we'll be talking about how to find and keep great fundraisers for your organization, which is a problem and a challenge that a lot of organizations have these days. We have two experts joining to share their advice, but before I introduce them, we have a few housekeeping items. First of all, there are a few ways to ask questions today if you'd like to ask questions of our guests. We've turned on the Q&A for the Hangout if you're watching on YouTube or Google+, so you can ask questions in that manner. If you're watching this on philanthropy.com, our website, you can simply comment on the chat box you see on the page, not the comments, but the box that says Chronicle Live Discussion at the top. So, so feel free to do that. You can also send a Twitter message using the hashtag #PhilChat, PhilChat. And if you'd like to review recording this discussion, it will be available immediately on this page, as well as on the Chronicle's Google+ and YouTube pages. Now, about our guests, Shaun Keister is the Vice Chancellor of Development at, let's introduce Shaun. There you go. Is the Vice Chancellor of Development and Alumni Relations at the University of California at Davis. Since arriving there a couple years ago, he's hired more than 40 fundraisers. Shaun, along with much of his staff, has appeared on the cover of our most recent fundraising guide, which I am just proudly displaying here. Shameless plug. Thank you for joining us, Shaun.
Thank you.
And we're also joined by Ronald J. Schiller, who's the veteran fundraiser and principal at the Aspen Leadership Group in Aspen, Colorado, which provides executive search services and consulting for a range of organizations and institutions. Glad you could be here, Ron.
Thank you, indeed.
Ron, can you start by telling us why it's so hard to find good fundraisers these days?
Well, there's an enormous amount of competition from a growing number of nonprofit organizations. But I've observed a number of things over the course of hiring myself, probably more than 500 fundraisers over the course of my career, and then now working in the executive search space, and we focus only on philanthropy careers. And so we're working with fundraising candidates all the time, and also clients hiring fundraisers. And just a few quick observations. Great fundraisers are great relationship builders. And so I think they know on a deep level that they're better off staying somewhere for enough years to see relationships bear fruit than to jump from position to position. So the ones who jump chasing titles and salaries are not the ones you want to hire and retain in the first place. The other great fundraisers don't become frustrated, in my experience, because of lack of promotion and lack of compensation. Rather, they become frustrated because they aren't given the freedom to be donor-focused and are instead chasing metrics based on institutional needs and timelines rather than metrics that are rooted in a culture that aims to secure the largest possible share of a donor's philanthropy. Also, they become frustrated when they don't have a seat at the table, and I hear this more than anything else. I think great fundraisers don't do this work to hit an individual or departmental dollar goal any more than donors give in order to hit dollar goals. They do it to help an organization fulfill its mission. And the less that people see their work connected to mission fulfillment, I think the less they feel compensated on that intellectual and psychological level, and the more they will try to fill that gap through compensation on a financial level. So while much attention is given to average tenures, I've seen institutions that routinely lose development officers every 6 to 12 months, and others that routinely keep development officers for 10 to 20 years. And the following characteristics, I would say, I've observed in leaders, my colleagues and I have observed in leaders who retain people. Number one, they build job descriptions around their best people rather than fit people into job descriptions. Number two, they're prepared to change those job descriptions as often as necessary to keep their best people fully engaged, so going to our retention question. Number three, they're flexible in compensation, not tied to only one increase per year, and not tied to a narrow range between the lowest and highest performers. They pay their highest performing frontline people well without forcing them to go into management if they're not going to be good at management. They know that very few people are good at both. And so they keep the best people on the front line, but pay them and give them incentives to stay on the front line. And finally, they focus on achievement as much as on goals, choosing a glass half full approach over a glass half empty approach. So my advice would be find people who can tell you about relationships, personal and professional, that they have had over many years, even decades. If they can't tell you about relationships like that, I don't think you want them. They're not naturally relationship builders. You can teach a lot about fundraising. I've found, and in fact my friend Connie Kravis, who's at University of Washington, said recently, I heard her say, you can't teach hardworking and you can't teach caring. So a lot of other things we can teach, but find people who are hardworking and find people who are caring. So in summary, great fundraisers work for institutions whose missions resonate deeply and personally with them. Their commitment to the mission gets them through a lot of difficult times. This is hard work, and it compensates them in ways that put title and salary in the proper perspective. So at Aspen Leadership Group, we are a bunch of development professionals. We've been in the field for more than 20 years, all of us. And we've seen a lot of great professionals, a lot of great institutions, but a lot of bad marriages. So we focus on career objectives, we focus on mission alignment, and bring our experience into that equation so that we can foster more excellent marriages. We therefore focus on people's careers rather than individual searches so that we can build the kinds of relationships that are going to help us find that mission alignment and therefore help institutions find people who are going to be able to stay longer.
Thanks, Ron. Shaun, do you have some thoughts about the challenges of finding top talent in this hiring climate?
Sure. I mean, I would, in the big scheme of things, agree with 90% of what Ron said based on my own experience of hiring dozens of fundraisers at 3 different large public universities over the last 15 years. You know, at UC Davis, we've hired about 40 fundraisers in less than 2.5 years, and a large part of that is just based on the demands that we will have going into our next much larger campaign than the one we just finished. So for us, we had the luxury at some points in that process to do what Ron said, and that was really fit the right people with the right positions at the right time. And having multiple searches going on at once does allow you that luxury. But I do think the big challenge is, you know, finding individuals in a very tight job market. As Ron said, it's fiercely competitive out there. Lots of organizations are hiring, and we're competing for the same talent. And at the same time, you know, this is not a profession that people know a lot about. You don't get a degree from a university in how to become a fundraiser. So we are seeking talent from a pool of people that may not even know that they could be great fundraisers because no one's ever really told them about the industry and the profession. I think we're a well-kept secret in many ways. What I have found in my own experience in higher education, though, is we have among our student body a very natural pool of people that we can recruit from, and from the philosophy of growing one's own talent. And that is, most of us have telemarketing programs, and we hire students in our development and alumni relations programs. And these are individuals who are doing the hardest work in our industry, cold calling alumni, parents, and friends of our industries and of our institutions, and getting gifts over the phone. So I have found that to be very fertile recruiting ground for individuals who have the right skill set to become successful fundraisers as well. But separate from that, I do think the biggest challenge we have is a competitive job market, and how do we distinguish ourselves from all of the other organizations someone could work for. And I'll do a quick run through and then happy to answer any questions about it. But we developed a program here at UC Davis over the last 2 years through surveying our fundraisers and finding out what they want, what they need, and what makes them happy, what it would take to retain them. And what we found are 4 things: clear and measurable goals, a career ladder that's very transparent, professional development opportunities, and a system of rewards and recognition. So we created a program, which we would argue is our recruitment and retention program at UC Davis, that incorporates those 4 key elements. And then there's a lot of information behind each of those 4. But clear and measurable goals, career ladder that's very transparent, professional development opportunities, and then rewarding and recognizing excellence.
That definitely a lot of things resonate there. The idea that you mentioned that one place you found fundraisers is students who are already raising money on behalf of the university. Ron also mentioned a connection to mission is very important to fundraisers. Do you think that organizations lose sight of that in their they're under so much pressure to raise more and more money to hit certain metrics? Do you think they lose sight of the importance of mission to fundraisers and people that they would like to recruit into their development departments? I mean, actually, Ron, do you want to take that first, and then
Yeah,
John?
I think they can. It is extremely difficult to find people. There was one article that was referenced in the I guess pre-reads for this that was Kent Dove, I believe, and Kurt Simic also talking about the success that Indiana University has had in having students, and we did that at University of Chicago as well, and had some great people coming right from being student volunteers into being development professionals. So I would like to underscore that. But they also talked about the importance of mission alignment, and Kent, I think, said something along the lines of when he got distracted from that by having to hire too quickly, they wound up upsetting the culture that they had worked so hard to create. And so I do think that it is important for everyone to pay attention to that mission alignment. What's difficult for candidates that we've found, and this is why we like to talk to people and build relationships over a long period of time, is that the job in an organization where I happen to be aligned with their mission is not necessarily the job that's open when I need a job, right? When I'm looking for a job. And I don't necessarily have a way of, as a candidate, of hearing about those jobs that are open. And so the Aspen Leadership Group is set up to help people hear more about. We're focused on relationships with lots of clients and lots of candidates so that we can be eyes and ears beyond what you happen to find in a job listing at the time that you happen to be looking for a job. So the more we as a profession, I think, can follow each other and help each other find positions where we're able to bring our own personal objectives into alignment with what the institution's trying to do, just like we do with donors all of the time, I think the more success that we're going to have in seeing longer tenures.
Shaun, do you want to weigh in on the importance of mission to fundraisers and to finding them and aligning with an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly, without a doubt, mission does matter. It's a very important piece of the equation in attracting and retaining top talent. But I look at it with a slightly different lens in that one could argue that the mission within higher education, for example, and I've worked in large public universities, so there's not a lot of distinguishing factors among large public universities. A lot of us have very comparable missions. So that still adds for a lot of competition, just even within the higher ed arena. For attracting and retaining the top talent. So I think mission matters, of course. I've spent my entire career in higher education because I'm wedded to that mission of education and research. But at the same time, that's still a pretty big universe, and the mission is still pretty broad. So I think there's more to it than just that. I think organizational fit, organizational culture, making sure that you're hiring the right people that embrace your vision and mission as an organization also matters, in addition to just mission. And by that I mean not every development operation is structured and strives for the same things. And finding individuals who, in our case at UC Davis, for example, that are goal-oriented, that do have a career path in mind, and that value the things we value, also matter in that mix. And trying to distinguish ourselves from other development operations and then finding the people that fit our culture is part of what we do as well. I agree with Ron. It takes time to do this, and I think every good organization looks at this as working our networks. So I have, I call it a Rolodex, although it's no longer a Rolodex because they're no longer in vogue. But I have a list of dozens of people that I've met over the years that I think would be great, but I call upon them when I think we have the ideal job, and then it's a question of timing. So I think part of it is working our own networks of people we know would be successful in our cultures, and then going out and recruiting them when the right positions are open and the timing is right for them. So it's a bit of a puzzle in that regard, and there's both an art and a science to it that I think we have to really look at. But I do think that being donor-centered, which we are at UC Davis, does help broaden the mix, if you will, of potential candidates, because I think the very best fundraisers respond well to a donor-centered culture, and when you have that and you can bring them in and make sure that they fit the other aspects of your culture, you get the best results.
So Shaun, I'm just wondering if I could jump in with a quick question on the number 4 that you talked about, rewards. There have been studies done recently that have shown the cost of a vacancy to an institution can exceed even $100,000. I think that was the Cygnus research that was done a couple of years ago, and we find that that certainly is true as well. And yet, I found at University of Chicago, and I find with a number of clients, that recognizing achievement, even with small bonuses or small other kinds of rewards, can be a lot less expensive to an institution than having to deal with a vacancy. Do you find the same thing is true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's interesting. Our rewards and recognition program is not tied to compensation. We have a separate raise program, of course, annual raise program, but candidly, our rewards and recognition is a 3-tier system. One is a very informal, very private recognition of excellence, peer-to-peer, where we've developed note cards, something very, very simple and old-fashioned, where people write to each other thank yous or acknowledgments of them going above and beyond the call of duty. And these note cards appear all over our offices, so it's interesting that they do work, and it's a very simple approach. Then we do a nomination process that where quarterly we recognize staff who nominated their peers in a bit more of a public way, for doing something, a unique act that was, again, culturally specific and appropriate, but also recognizing where someone's done something pretty extraordinary. And then the third level of our program is something much more formal. And once a year, and this is the inaugural year for us, in fact later this month, we will announce 5 very specific awards, again tied to our culture, tied to our value system within our division. Basically from an Employee of the Year to a Spirit Award to a Behind the Scenes Award. These will be very public recognition in front of peers, and it will involve other leaders on the campus recognizing their excellence. So we are hitting it at multiple levels, and we did that because based on our own survey of our own staff, different people respond to different rewards and recognition.
These are simple and yet really powerful ideas, and I will say, talking to candidates who are frustrated where they're working right now, it is rarely, it's usually because these kinds of things are missing, and it seems like there's just an endless goal that is never reachable, and it just goes year to year to year without leadership taking the opportunity, taking that moment to step back and say thank you and recognize. And again, it's not very expensive, but it sure saves a lot of money compared to filling a vacancy. So
absolutely.
One thing I'd like to ask each of you about is the balance between hard and soft skills when you're recruiting a fundraiser. We have a reader question about, for example, about how important it is for candidates to have a CFRE credential. Do you have some thoughts on that, for example?
Well, on that particular question of having a CFRE, it's a nice to have, but for me, I candidly could care less. I'm looking for actual experience. I'm looking for individuals who've made a commitment to other organizations, have some longevity with those organizations when I look at their resume. And then I'm looking for a lot of the things Ron spoke of earlier, which don't necessarily come through on a resume, but through interviews and meeting individuals, you can decipher whether or not they're successful at relationship building, whether or not they're goal-oriented, whether or not they are, in fact, donor-centered in their approach to fundraising. Those things, and maybe you call them soft skills, but I guess it's some of both, matter far more to me than a certificate, to be real candid.
I completely agree. And that's what I find with our clients as well. They find it to be a nice to have. It is a way of acquiring some knowledge, but that is some, and I don't want to belittle how we've devoted our lives to learning those things. So there's important information to be learned about the skills of this profession. But there are many of these things that are much harder to teach that are really very important during that search process, the things that Shaun and I were just talking about.
Also about recruiting, what are some places that organizations should be looking for candidates that maybe they aren't looking, either fields or professions, or they aren't looking often enough?
Well, I do think the students is an excellent idea, and we could be doing so much more in our individual institutions and then also as a profession in giving those students an idea of what it's like to be in a development office, in a development job. So that's really important. But I also think looking at people who share the mission, share that commitment to the mission, and that may include alumni, but it's also finding people who have expressed an interest in the mission, might be working in other fields, but we find it very difficult to break into what has become a profession, but therefore it's a lot of clients are not initially open to the idea of considering somebody who doesn't therefore have 10 years of experience in a development shop just like mine. And so we're trying to help individuals who want to come into the profession understand the kinds of things that they have done in their own backgrounds that would be transferable and that would be applicable, and then helping them highlight those in their letters and in their resumes so that they at least have the chance to meet a person like Shaun, and convince him that they have those harder to teach qualities that he might be looking for, and convince him that he may be able to teach the other pieces. There's something really valuable in getting experience in the profession, but there are different ways to do it. Another way to do it is to be a volunteer for an organization, as an example. So.
And the only thing I would add is, while I agree with everything that was just stated, and certainly if we can find people within the development profession, we tend to err on the side of recruiting those individuals before other industries. But I have seen some very successful transitions from sales, individuals who have a sales background and really do resonate with the mission of the institution and wants to do something that is different than sales. Some of those skills are certainly transferable. Now, I've seen it work and I've seen it fail, so I think there's a little bit more of a risk in taking someone out of the corporate sector and bringing them into development. But I have seen success stories, and I think it is really interviewing in a way that gets to whether or not they can go beyond sales, and that is the relationship building and the commitment to the mission as well.
Some of the ones I think who've made them more successful, and I've seen more failures than successes in that transition, but some of the ones who've been more successful have been volunteers and donors themselves. So they already have a better understanding of the difference between that for-profit culture and non-profit culture. That gives them an advantage, definitely.
Agree.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. I have a couple questions I want to throw out. One, what are some red flags that organizations should heed that a candidate is maybe better at getting fundraising jobs than actually fundraising?
Well, let me say, Ron's already said it, but candidly, I look at the resume, and if there's a lot of job hopping, they go way low to the list of potential candidates. And here's the reality, and studies have shown this, but my own experience has shown, it takes 3 years, minimum of 3 years, for someone to truly prove themselves, to actually build meaningful relationships with donors and close gifts and gifts that are at the appropriate level relative to the donor. And so unless someone has a track record of spending 3+ years, and generally I'm looking for more than that, to be really honest, for more senior level positions, then they really probably have never really done the job. They've gone in and they've made some personal visits, maybe they've closed some smaller gifts, they got lucky along the way. But longevity matters in this business, and that there's great irony in that, because so many people job hop and can stay at a place for 2 years and go somewhere else because there's such a shortage of talent in our business. But I really don't want those people at my institution. I want people who have a real, true track record, and that, generally speaking, is 3 or more years in a position to really maximize and begin to produce at a level that a good development officer should.
Yes, I would underscore that absolutely, and suggest to people this is, again, why it's so important to find the right institution, the right boss who's going to invest in you, in your career, help you grow, and the place where you're going to be aligned with the mission, so that you can grow within that institution over several years, start to see fruit from your work. I would add one more red flag, which is a huge one, and it's underscored by all of the clients with whom we work. When people talk about my prospect or my prospects, or when their resume is filled with I raised this much and I raised that much, it's a red flag. For me, it's a red flag for my colleagues, it's a red flag for a lot of our clients. It's an easy trap to fall into because it's shorthand and we talk that way, but it shows that the person is not necessarily focused on the donor, and understanding also a culture that celebrates the fact that any gift is the result probably of dozens of people, some of whom we'll never know about, touching that donor and their family. And so the idea of I raised $4 million is, for me, and I see Shaun nodding his head, a big red flag.
Well, I would put an exclamation point on that. Ron and I did not pre-rehearse this, let me just say that. But and the reason I say it, would underscore it, is fundraising is a team sport. I mean, at the end of the day, no one person does this. It requires a team of people to close a major gift. And our #1 value at UC Davis is teamwork and collaboration. I'm sure my staff are sick of hearing me saying those 2 words over and over again, but teamwork and collaboration is how we raise the most money for our organization. And anything short of that means we're leaving money on the table. So I think that's a great point, Ron. Thank you for making.
Just one more. Our time is running short, so one more question. Most people I know who hire other people have a go-to question, or a question that rarely fails to reveal what the candidate is all about. Maybe in this case, it's how good they are at building relationships. It's whether they have a connection to the mission. Do you have a question that you would suggest to people watching this as they're trying to hire fundraisers that you find really helps you make a decision or helps you learn more about the candidate?
Sure. Go ahead, Shaun.
Well, I mean, I think the 2 that have been stated are the top 2, and that is the mission question, and then questions around relationships that they've had with donors, and asking for those stories are both very critical, and Ron brought them both up earlier. The only other one that might be worth considering, and one that I generally do ask, is I ask them really questions that get to whether or not they're donor-centered in their approach. So during the interview, getting to the we versus me which again we've already talked about, so that I know by the end of the interview that this is someone who is going to be a team player and collaborative and in fact donor-centered. And there are questions you can ask around that get to whether or not the individual is that type of person versus someone who's going to look at it as my prospects, the gifts that I've raised, and I think that's also important to add to the mix.
Yeah, and I would just add, in trying to decide between two final candidates, my colleagues and I, over the years, would always ask ourselves, who do we want at the barbecue in our backyard? Because it would finally say to us, here's a person I want to be with, therefore probably a person I'm going to want to work with, who I think of as a team player, and somebody that my donors or the donors that are part of our institution are also going to want to be with. And that was almost always a deciding factor when suddenly one candidate became the person who looked really good on paper and the other was the one who you really wanted to be with.
Okay, thank you for giving us your advice and insight today. I think our time is up, so I just want to wrap up here. Thanks to everyone who joined the conversation today. It looks like we have 125 viewers right now, so that's pretty good. If you'd like to review this session, a recording will be immediately available on Google Plus and YouTube, as well as philanthropy.com. Just to give you a heads up about more online offerings from the Chronicle of Philanthropy, our next webinar will be on Thursday, September 11th at 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and it's called How to Attract Hispanic Donors. That's something that a lot of organizations have on their minds these days. You can get a discount on that webinar by using the code CHAT15, CHAT15. That's good for both 15% off the early bird rate, which ends this Friday, September 5th, and the regular rate. Go to philanthropy.com/webinars, and don't forget the code CHAT15 if you're interested in that. I also would like to do another shameless plug for our fundraising guide, which appears in our, actually that's a better view of it. Great fundraisers, and we have two of them right here. A lot of the things that we spoke about in the last half hour are covered in this issue, and there's also some wonderful advice, I think, from a lot of veteran fundraisers and people who hire them, and also some profiles of some people who are really great at the job of raising money for organizations. So I hope you are able to take a look at that. Thanks to our guests. Thank you, Shaun. And thank you. And thank you, Ron.
Pleasure.
And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Have a great afternoon.
Take care.